Previously, I've done reviews of two different portable record players from Music Public Kingdom. One was a suitcase-style record player with an Audio-Technica magnetic cartridge, which turned out to be really good, and another was a slot-loading 7-inch record player, which turned out to be really bad. But they have another record player I've been wanting to do a review of. It's a portable 7-inch record player, so it's not for playing full-size albums, it's only for 7-inch or smaller records. It's the model TT251, and as of when I bought this on Amazon, it was $29.85. So a complete record player for less than $30. They call it a portable mini suitcase turntable. It's a 2-speed turntable for 33 1/3 and 45 RPM. It does not do 78 RPM. Although in this case that's not such a big disadvantage because most 78 RPM records are 10 inches or 12 inches and would not fit on this anyway. There were some 7-inch 78 RPM records, but they're pretty rare. Dynamic built-in stereo speaker, well that's a lie, it's only mono, as we'll see. Belt drive system, Japanese ceramic cartridge. This one I'm unsure of. We'll talk more about that later. Headphone jack, handmade wooden housing with PU leather wrapping. That's really just vinyl, it's not real leather. And it's available in blue, black, or purple. Well, the purple looks more like a pinkish color, but I got the one that's black. Just like the two other products I've reviewed from MPK, it comes neatly packaged in a box with a carrying handle. It comes with a power adapter, which I've already removed from its box. A box of international plug adapters, so you can use it anywhere in the world. This little thank you card. They say it comes with a full 12 months warranty and always free tech support. And an owner's manual on very thick paper, but it's not nearly as comprehensive as it looks because all these pages are just different languages. It's actually only 2 pages in English. One just basically shows you the controls, and the other page just gives you some very basic instructions. So here it is, and without anything else to compare it to, you may think it's about the same size as a Crosley Cruiser or any one of those very common suitcase-style record players. That's until we compare it to an actual Crosley Cruiser, and you can see it's much smaller. Or its big brother from MPK, the TT270 suitcase-style record player. MPK calls this the world's smallest suitcase-style record player, but I don't know if that's true anymore because Crosley has introduced a mini cruiser designed specifically to play 3-inch records, which was their resurrection of the Japanese 8-band format that Techmoan did a video about. So I don't know if that's smaller than this. I'll have to look up the dimensions, but either way it's going to be about the same size as that, except this can also play 7-inch records, which I think makes it much more useful. Unlike the larger TT270, this does have a carrying handle. It has a metal latch to keep it closed. If we open that up, we can look inside, see the platter, the tone arm, the single built-in speaker. So like I said, it's not true that this has built-in stereo speakers. There's only one. Taking a closer look at it, as the jack for the provided 5-volt DC power adapter, which is worldwide voltage. 33 and a 45 RPM speed selector switch. It came set to the 45 RPM speed setting because most 7-inch records are 45 RPM. On, off, and volume control. You can hear it click when you turn it off with a little red power indicator LED. Headphone jack, the aforementioned built-in speaker. There is the holder for the 45 RPM adapter. But one thing you may not realize it comes with, because it doesn't really show up in the photos, is a neoprene rubber platter mat, which is very nice. And you may notice the center spindle is smaller than the normal size. That's because this is the size used for some of those 3-inch records. And there's another size used by those 3-inch records, I guess to sort of emulate the look of a 45 with the larger center hole. Some of those also have a larger center hole, so they give you this little adapter here. It comes with this record player, even though it's not advertised as playing 3-inch records. It includes the adapter for that, so you can put that on and play 3-inch records. Or if you want to play records with the typical LP size center hole, they give you this little adapter. And to play 45s with the large center hole, they give you this adapter. So it's a little bit clumsy if you're mostly playing 45s with a bigger center hole. You need not one adapter, but actually two adapters. And they give you a space for the 45 adapter back there, but there's no real space to store these. But I discovered you can actually fit these other adapters underneath the 45 adapter. If you put this one over on that side, and this one sort of on this side, and you can fit the 45 RPM adapter on top of it, and that way when you're carrying this thing around, those two smaller ones won't go rattling around and possibly get lost. And to make this thing truly portable, you can also fit the included power adapter inside it. If you sort of position it right there, it'll fit and you can close the lid. But you will need to carry this around because this is not battery powered. MPK does have a very similar 7-inch portable record player that can run on batteries. It has a holder for 4 AA batteries. That's the model TT250. It costs a little bit more. I think it's like $32 or $33. Now finally, let's try actually playing some records on this thing. I have a box full of 45s, but I'm going to start out with this. It's Man on the Moon, narrated by Walter Cronkite. So let's turn this on. You see the power indicator LED light up. And it does have auto start if you pick up the tone arm and move it towards the center. It does start spinning, but there's no auto shut off. At the end of the record, you'll need to manually pick it up and bring it back to the rest. This one is a 33 1/3 RPM record with the small center hole, but this is actually pressed on styrene. It's not vinyl. So styrene was not used just for 45s, it was also used for some 33 1/3 RPM records. So we'll give this a try.
Now it is time to take longer strides. Time for a great new American enterprise. Time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth.
On May 25th, 1961, President John Fitzgerald Kennedy addressed the Congress of the United States. He spoke at a time when it appeared the Soviet Union was about to widen its lead in space over the best American efforts. The Russians already had put the first satellite into Earth orbit, put their hammer and sickle emblem on the moon, and sent the first man into space.
Recognizing the head start obtained by the Soviets with their large rocket engines, which gives them many months of lead time, and recognizing the likelihood that they will exploit this lead for some time to come in still more impressive successes, we nevertheless are required to make new efforts on our own. I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
And they did. So you can hear it's not high fidelity at all. It sounds like a little pocket-sized transistor radio, which is appropriate enough for this kind of program material. It's probably what people heard that kind of broadcast on originally. So very poor quality sound, but it does get pretty loud, and it's clear. It should be perfectly fine for a kid to listen to. Now let's try playing a 45. This one is Bangity Bangity Bus, narrated by Soupy Sales. Anybody old enough to remember who that guy is? So I already put the 45 spindle adapter on and set it to 45 RPM. So here we go.
Did you ever ride in a bus that sounds like this? When time ago, I did. That's what this story is about. There's a
What did he say? A long time ago?
Yellow, rickety old school bus going down the road full of boys and girls. The yellow words on top say, "The Bingity Bangity School Bus." I know I'll never see the children again, he snuffled. But there was something Busby didn't know. Turn the page and you'll see. But before you do that, turn the record over. Did you turn the record over? Well, you must have, because this is the second part of the story of the Bingity Bangity Bus. And I'm still Soupy Sales.
As for playing some music, here's something which I don't think will generate a copyright match. Big Brown Eyes by The Holidays on Track Records.
So sweet and bad. Yeah, yeah. Heaven above, she's got eyes that were made to love. Eyes that were made to love.
One disappointment with this thing is the headphone jack. It's nice that it has it, but unfortunately it's only in mono. If you plug in stereo headphones or a pair of stereo external speakers, the sound does come out of both sides, but it's the same thing in both channels. It's just dual channel mono. It's not true stereo. But depending on which era of records you're playing on this thing, that may not be such a big deal, because up until the early 1970s, virtually all 45 RPM records were in mono. It was very uncommon for them to be in stereo until around 1971. So if you're playing mostly records from the 50s and 60s and early 70s, you won't notice any difference because those records are not in stereo anyway. If you do connect external speakers or headphones, the sound quality improves quite a bit compared to the built-in speaker, but not as much as you would expect, partly because, like most of these inexpensive record players made today, they do not properly match the impedance of the ceramic cartridge it uses, causing a loss of bass response, and also partly because the motor in this thing is very noisy. It's not being picked up by the stylus, it's just picked up by the circuitry. Hear that? It's not audible through the built-in speaker because it doesn't reproduce those low frequencies anyway, but you can clearly hear that noise through external speakers or headphones.
Just a man of simple taste. You have no chance to see my face. My heart, my soul are for the race.
Let me just talk about this tone arm. Specifically designed for playing 7-inch or smaller records, so it has the correct tracking angle, as I'll show later. One thing I really like is it clamps into place without needing a hook to put on top of it. You just push it down on top of this little clip here. That's a very neat design. It does use the very common red ceramic cartridge that you see in all these low-end cheapo record players these days. MPK claims this is a Japanese made model. I'm not sure about that. I took this off and looked at it, and it's a YD brand. So it's not a genuine Chuodenshi CZ800, it's a clone. I guess it could be made in Japan, I don't know. But it does seem to be higher quality than these JC clones that you can buy by the dozen on Amazon or eBay for like $1 or $2 each. So this is still a clone, but it's probably a higher quality clone than the rest of them. The stylus itself also seems to be higher quality than most of those other clones. It was easy to remove by hand, unlike those JC clones where you have to pretty much pry it off with a screwdriver. And although it does have a plastic cantilever, that is a sapphire stylus, not the ruby stylus on most of those other clones, which have a nasty habit of permanently damaging styrene 45s. This one does not, which is very important for a record player that's going to spend most of its life playing 45 RPM records. It has to be one that's kind to the grooves of styrene as well as vinyl records, and this one is. As for the tracking force, as I've mentioned in previous videos, this cartridge was designed for 4 to 6 grams, with 5 grams being recommended, which will not damage records in normal use. If we measure this one, it comes in at about 5.2 grams, which is perfect, almost exactly where it should be. As for the alignment of the tone arm, I actually had to make cutouts in my protractor to get it to fit, but that's pretty much perfect, exactly aligned up with the lines on this protractor. So they did correctly design this tone arm for playing these smaller records. And just to prove that this thing will not play LPs, here is a 10-inch record, and even it is too big to fit. It's on the center spindle there, but you can see there's no way it's going to fit on this player. So even if this thing did damage records, which it does not, you won't have to worry about it ruining any of your most cherished audiophile grade albums, because they won't even fit on it. To take this thing apart, there are 4 rubber plugs you need to pry out. There's one behind the tone arm there, and 2 in the front, and then you remove the Phillips screws that are underneath them. Then you can just pull out the entire mechanism, and it's actually not attached to anything, because this cabinet is just a cabinet. There's no electrical connections anywhere on it. Because like I said, there's a similar model which has a second half of a plastic case with a battery compartment in the bottom. So they use the same mechanism for both models. There you can see the tiny built-in speaker. It's 2 inches in diameter, 8 ohms, 1 watt. There's the motor. It's made by JYK, which is actually the company that manufactures these Music Public Kingdom record players. So either they made the motor themselves or they contracted some other company to make them and put their name on them. I just wish they would make higher quality motors that were not as prone to flutter, especially if this tiny plastic platter doesn't have a lot of rotational mass to help smooth it out. So on a turntable like this, which is very small and light, the flutter becomes a lot more noticeable. So they really should try to use higher quality motors in these things. There's the main circuit board. Here are the wires coming from the phono cartridge, and it has separate left and right wires, even though this thing only puts out mono, both through the built-in speaker and the headphone jack. I think what happened is the part of the circuit that combines the channels to mono for the built-in speaker is also doing that for the headphone jack, even though they probably didn't intend to. So even though the headphone jack also has separate left and right connections on it, it's just combined to mono. And that connection there is for the battery pack, which is not equipped on this model, but is on the very similar one that comes in a plastic clamshell case. It has diodes for reverse polarity protection, which also means if you did connect a battery pack and plug the AC adapter in, it would not attempt to charge the batteries unless you jumpered over this diode here. So if they cut a hole in the bottom of this case and added an access door, they very well could add a battery option to this model if they wanted to. So yes, this player has very bad sound quality, both through the built-in speaker and the headphone output, but it's only $29 and it's clearly aimed at children, and it really is just a modern day equivalent of one of these things. This is a portable record player from the late 60s or early 70s. This one's a little fancier because it actually has a built-in AM radio, but clearly designed mostly for playing 45s. It even has a clip in here for storing records in the lid, and obviously also aimed at children. This one was owned by Mary E. McTeague. My wish list for this product would be a higher quality built-in speaker that's not so tinny, a better quality motor that's not so noisy and fluttery, and to redesign the circuit board to have a stereo headphone output, and also possibly add a built-in rechargeable battery pack. But then they probably wouldn't be able to sell it for $29, and for the kids who end up using this, they probably wouldn't notice the difference, so it's all a trade-off. At the very least, I wish they would not advertise it as having a built-in stereo speaker when it's clearly not stereo.
You can't make a bad sound on the accordion. For example, listen to the string effect. Now we gradually add the horns and the flutes. So you see that all these voices may be added to achieve just the tone color and the balance you desire.